governance structure and/or participate in provincially funded amalgamation study, you will have to focus on the cost, efficiency, quality of service, and suitable level of autonomy in determining or agreeing to a new model, if any, and transition to it. Let me leave one question with you. Will there be an improvement in efficiency and reduction in cost if council were to set strategic plan, strategic policy, and give the implementation responsibility and authority to the operational staff? This would mean obviously setting up a cap on the budget increase. Respectfully, I suggest at this time you look deeper into the operation of SANH. Mr. Mayor and Councillor, you have a lot more to do than just to receive this report. Just receiving the report may not be good enough. Thank you for an opportunity to speak.
All right, thank you, Haji. Haji, could you leave a copy of your speech with us?
Is some scribbles on it? Excuse my scribbles. They're all readable.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public that wish to speak to items D1 and D2 on the agenda? Please come forward. Calling for a second time. Any other members of the public that wish to speak? Calling for a third time? Okay, let's close the section on public input. Thank you so much. And let's move to item D, resolutions for adoption. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This next item is the property tax and utility fee increases. The report of the Director of Finance is recommending that Council receive this report for information.
Councillor Dermott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to move receipt. If there's a seconder, I'll speak to it. Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank Ms. Tenney and the staff for an excellent report. Really very, very thorough, and I think there's a lot to explain both to Council and I hope more broadly to the public exactly why there have been significant increases over a period of time. Some of them internal, although even things like staffing. The model that has been used for some parts of our organization is to set a standard in the country really for what will be a cost, and then that cost tends to ripple through negotiations across the country. So it becomes not just an internal thing. There have been issues of downloading. There have been issues that Council has had to embark on a program of catching up to infrastructure investment, because unfortunately in the past those kinds of investments were not made. And we were having an increasing infrastructure deficit that was unfunded. And that's not a desirable thing. We are not finished with that program. We're partway through it, and hopefully it will be one step in putting the municipality on solid financial footing. And not leave us in a situation with a huge bill in the future or emergency repairs, which are always incredibly expensive. One of the things I note in this report, and I would agree with Haji that there will be a need to look at where we go with this report, I think, sometime in the future. I would disagree somewhat that Council will be able to just set a cap on budget increases. Council went through, as the report points out, that Council went through about a 5-year program of budget restraint or reduction a few years back, and that has left a legacy of a very, very tight situation where if Council wishes to change the current circumstances, and there are contracts in place that we must honor at this point, that if we decide we're significantly going to cap increases or reduce spending, we will be looking at service reductions. That's simply a reality. And as the report points out, the survey that we have done frequently points out that the public is very pleased with the level of service they receive and would like to see it continue. There is that dichotomy, having the service and having to be able to pay for it. And it is a difficult one to work out. I want to add something to the report, and that's simply, at the end we talk about near, immediate, and long-term options. And one of the things that I would like to see canvassed more is the fact that we really have needed over time to plan for and set the stage for development or redevelopment of certain areas of the municipality in a sustainable manner. Places like the Shelbourne Corridor, which we have done some work on yet so far, quite a bit of work really, but haven't yet quite come to a resolution. And certainly the Douglas Corridor, which are places that make sense for new communities in the municipality and can be put in a place where they can build on existing infrastructure and not create, sprawl development does, huge infrastructure bills for future citizens and future councils. To do that and to make it viable and to make it attractive, the way Vancouver has done in some of its areas, in Portland as well, we really have to make sure we get it right. And we have to create plans for communities, and planning is the key to start with, but plans that make it very, very attractive for the private sector to invest in. So we need to look at how can we provide dense new communities in those areas that are attractive and provide a quality of life that in many ways is equivalent to single family. Simply creating a situation where we bump up a lot of buildings is not going to do it. We've got to look at how can we create the very best of denser communities and communities that will be attractive for all demographics to live in. If we can do that, that becomes a huge potential source of sustainable revenue in the future. Much in the way Uptown brought a lot of revenue to the municipality through its development. The development of that corridor, Douglas Street, and indeed the Shelbourne Corridor, could provide a huge amount of sustainable revenue built on compact infrastructure and infrastructure that becomes affordable in the long term. So I hope that Council will see that in this report, and I hope that Council sometime in the future will look at what can we do to build that revenue source of property tax in a sustainable manner for the future. Thank you.
Councillor Murdoch?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could I call on Ms. Tinney to answer a question? Hi. Thank you very much for the...
For the audience's benefit, this is our Director of Finance,
yes,
Valentini.
the author of the report. I thank you very much for the report. As Mr. Sharania said, it's a very detailed, lengthy report, and I appreciate the level of detail you've put into it. I'm just curious about, the report mentions a couple times that there's a forthcoming report for next week's meeting where we're going to talk about the next budget. And so I wondered if you could just talk a little bit about how this would inform that, if they complement each other, and how you would see us handling that discussion really in two parts.
Okay, thank you. Through the mayor to Councillor Murdoch. So there's actually a third report that's coming as well, and that's the public participation component. So I agree there's a lot of information, so I divided it into 3 reports to hopefully compartmentalize it and make it a little bit easier to digest. So this is really just setting the stage, giving the information that is relevant to what's been happening. The next report will talk a little bit about what the future is looking like, where we're going, we set guidelines every year. Previously they've gone to FAP. Due to the nature of this request, it's coming to council because that was the indication of the budget process. So the guidelines will be there. We'll be able to review those guidelines, take a look at what we're looking at for the future, and formally as a council establish guidelines, consider whether you are interested in a cap. That was another item that came out of the budget process to bring back to council was what are the pros and cons of a cap, so the report will discuss that as well. So in the context of all of this, hopefully you'll be able to look at those guidelines and feel informed enough to set the guidelines for next year.
Thank you. You foreshadowed the public participation report on the budget process. And I was thinking about this within the context of how we go through that consultation. And so could you give us a little more insight into what we can anticipate coming in the next couple of weeks on that?
I haven't started that report yet. This one took me a little while, as will the next one. Just looking at options of what, given the actual functional mechanisms that we have for physically creating the budget. So there's some restraints with resourcing both information technology and in human resources and the number of staff to put a process together. So just kind of lay out, where we are, what we can do, what's some low-hanging fruit for public participation that we can easily get together and get out there, all the way to, where we want to go and how we might get there in the future. We're not going to be able to get there for the 2016 budget. But what we need to do to get to a place where council is going to be really happy and the public is going to be happy about the amount of interaction that's happening. And we need to figure out what that interaction level is. I don't know that, because we haven't had any before, we don't know where that sweet spot is.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. My comments on the report and the motion to receive, I agree with Mr. Schrader's comments that we need to do more than just receive the report. But that was why I was curious from Ms. Tinney, the context of how this fits into the overall process for moving forward and how we engage the public as part of that process. Because I think even setting the guideline for the coming year needs to be a process where we talk about all of these issues and what's informing the future budgets really over the remainder of this term and going forward. So I'm quite happy to support the motion to receive. I look forward to next week's report and the soon-to-be written report on public participation, because I think all of that is going to shape how we move forward in the next year, 5 years, probably beyond that. We're not going to get it perfect right off the bat, but I think we've got good elements here to start an informed conversation about the kinds of decisions council has to make in consultation with taxpayers. Thank you very much.
Councillor Haynes.
Director Tinney, if you could stay there, please. This is a lovely report and a lot of work went into it, and I really appreciate that. And also that this acts as a bit of a step-off point for several things that council are undertaking. As some of my colleagues have noticed, our economic base, this talks to that, how we're going to get that, strengthen our economic base so that we can meet our residents' request to keep our tax increases as low as possible. I enjoyed hearing that Councillor Brownoff had actually made some suggestions linked to this about shared, I think it was builder's license, not business license. Is that what you said?
Business license.
I mean, that also talks to our integration of services around the region. So that's another piece of the work that we're looking at out of the governance. And the fact you've got 2 more reports coming forward, like Councillor Murdoch, my colleague, sometimes at 8 o'clock on a Friday night, I'm just wondering how to spend the next hour. Now both, with his enthusiasm for these reports, I know what we'll both be doing. No, we can call each other and say, hey, did you read page 4 yet? That was... But thank you very much.
Any further discussion or questions for staff on this motion to receive this report? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. All right, let's move on to the next item, D2. Madam Clerk.
Thank you. This item is the Horticulture Centre of the Pacific request for a tripartite agreement and postponement of claim. The recommendation from the Director of Finance is recommending that Council approve postponement of claim between the District, the Horticulture Centre of the Pacific, and the Vancouver City Savings Credit Union.
I'll move the recommendation.
Will someone second? Councillor Haynes seconds. Councillor Bryce, would you like to speak to it?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Before you speak, can I just ask the audience, can everybody hear all right with the noise of the fans? Does everyone can hear us through our microphones? Okay. Sorry, Councillor, please go ahead.
Not at all. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this. The Horticulture Centre of the Pacific, of course, is sandwich lands with programs supported by this council with financial obligations that they are attempting to make And I think that supporting them with this resolution shows a continued level of support and a reality of the sort of situation that they're facing. I like to think of some of these assets much more in terms of decades than in terms of a single year. And this property, this concept, these programs are worthy of our sort of continued investment. And I think by supporting this motion, that's what it is. It's kind of an underscoring of previous decisions that we've made as a council to support this funding of the HCP in these very challenging times. I'm heartened that they have very good leadership on their board, and I think this is a motion which is one that is supportive, and while everything has a risk in it when you're talking about financial matters, I would say that from our community's point of view, the risk is definitely a greater value than stepping back at this time and not giving them 100% support.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sanders, and then Murdoch.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too will be supporting this. I think it's a wise decision to make. I was their liaison with the Horticulture Centre for 7 years, and during the time of their redevelopments. At the time, they were very successful with weddings, which were bringing in more revenue than anything they had, and they made a decision when they had the horrific fire and the glass house burnt down to build the Coulommiers Pavilion in memory of Malcolm Coulommiers, who was a driving force on their board. And they do have a very strong board with a vision. And they took the decision that because of the weddings, that they would build this pavilion for basically the capacity to hold events and such, and the market hasn't been there as such. It wasn't the right decision to make. Absolutely fabulous building, but the better decision, of course, would have been to work with the horticultural people that were looking for a place to rent and have shows and such. And I've been pleased to hear that recently that is where they're now landing and having the support from that, and will be adapting as such. And it's not that they won't be doing the weddings and socials, but it's a turning point of what they have to look at. They are a hidden treasure that people aren't quite aware of. It's a lot easier to walk around there than the whole of Woodchucks, and they're absolutely just as fabulous. And what they are is they're an education center for people actually getting a trade and such, but they're also providing service and many educational ones, such as master gardeners, and just hobby courses and such. Wonderful restaurant. The gardens are fabulous, and of course I mentioned the pavilion. So I think with their board and such, they have a direction. They need to do these repairs, which certainly are affecting them, their ability to pay Saanich. But they have such a potential there to become a tourist destination, and that is something they've really talked about, and to be an economic driver. And as Saanich does own the land, I think that we are quite comfortable. So I'm quite comfortable in supporting them because we do have a vision and a strength there, and they've just had a little bit of direction that they will change, and I think they can address it.
Thank you, Councillor Murdoch.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think, is this a question for Ms. Tinney again? Yeah. Thanks very much for the information in the report. I was curious, in the letter from the Hort Centre, they make reference to the loan from Van City and security Van City was seeking, and it kind of sounded like Van City went around and tagged all of the furniture and appliances to make sure they were going to get their money out of the place. So Councillor Bryce has already mentioned, it's Saanich property. I mean, I'm not too concerned about what's going to happen at the end of the day, but just in terms of the asset with what Van City has now, or will be, loaning the Hort Centre in addition to what we're owed. What level of assurance have we got that we can actually recoup that funding if there's not, heaven forbid, if they're not able to actually get around to paying us back?
Through the mayor to Councillor Murdoch, within the lease itself, if something were to happen to HCP, the Van City would have the ability to assign the mortgage to another, so they would be looking for another party to own that facility and continue to pay the mortgage. So what I can take from this lease, in essence, I believe the district would be working with Van City to find a suitable replacement to continue the mortgage payments and continue the running of the facility.
Okay, so just I'm trying to think through what could potentially happen here. The Cuvalier Pavilion would be owed, or Van City would be owed on as part of that Cuvalier Pavilion.
Mm-hmm.
We've got the property, we've leased, and we're looking for somebody to move in there.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, I'm just thinking if there's anything else out there that gives us the satisfaction that we can get that money back.
Sorry, the money out of the facility?
Well, because we're owed $240,000.
Oh, that
Yeah.
are the funds that we are owed.
Well, just because we're being asked again to pay deference to Van City, and obviously a $750,000 plus a $70,000 obligation to Van City is considerable. And so I'm just wondering, long term, if we're not able to recoup that funding, are there other assets beyond the property that represent value for the district of Sandwich?
I'm sorry, Councilor Rebecca, I don't know what the actual these movable assets. I don't have a list of what those are, so I'm not able to answer that directly. As mentioned by the other councillors, we own the land,
Yes.
so certainly there is a fair bit of control there, and we would work with Van City if they defaulted on that mortgage. Ultimately, we would have the ability to manage that. So yeah, there is some financial risk in this. There's no doubt about that. But at this point, the HCP is coming forward with solid plans, and there's a risk level. We don't believe at this time that it's untenable and ill-advised to move forward.
Yeah, I accept all that. I agree with you, and I think that, you know, Sandwich took on or provided a loan at a time when we were not the owners of the property, and conditions have changed considerably. So we were actually in a much more fortuitous position than when we agreed to give the money in the first place. So in that respect, I agree with you. There is low risk. I think it helps us preserve and promote an asset that really is part of Sandwich. So it will enjoy my full support. I was just thinking through in terms of the probabilities if we find ourselves in a position where HCP is just not able to pay. But I appreciate your responses.
Certainly develop a briefing to provide some additional information.
Thank you.
Ms. Tinney, just a question for myself before I go down to some other councillors. Is it the opinion of our staff that this is an investment that's necessary to make in order to allow HCP to pay back the loan? Because we're talking about facility upgrades here.
Essentially, under the lease agreement, the Horticulture Centre HCP can take out a mortgage without the approval of the district. Under the lease, they can do that and only notify. So the decision-making mechanism here is strictly the postponed claim. We don't, as staff, sort of analyze their circumstances. They've written a letter and said they're a professional board. They've written a letter saying that they require these repairs to increase their revenue. I don't go and analyze their financial statements and ascertain that to be the fact. We take it on the face as a professional board that they're providing us with their best information.
Okay. And can you just refresh my memory? What was the first postponement of the claim?
The first postponement of the claim was based on the original full mortgage of $750,000.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, next I had Councillor Durban and then Haynes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I became liaison at HCP immediately after Councillor Sanders. I arrived just after the Pavilion had been completed. The board had actually done some due diligence and had some economic analysis done about the prospects for the pavilion. Unfortunately, that analysis, which had been done professionally, turned out to be rather optimistic and inaccurate in the end. I think we are looking at a situation of, are we going to try to put HCP in a position to maximize their opportunity for success? And I think we have to, and for that reason I'm going to support the motion. ultimately, we own the land, and ultimately, in the end, if HCP fails, it will come down to Saanich working with, hopefully, the credit union, but basically Saanich will drop into Saanich's lap, and there's little doubt about that. I think if we provide what does seem to be a very professional board, a very qualified board, the opportunity to succeed, then I think we're much better off. Otherwise, we would put them in a situation where we would probably make it more likely that things would drop into our lap, and that's not a good outcome. A number of the projects that they wish to undertake as a result of this additional loan are really not optional. In terms of the restaurant they have there, Nourish, which has turned out to be extremely successful and well received, they have to meet certain standards, and they aren't right now. And, for that restaurant to operate and continue to be successful, it's one of the more successful financial endeavors in the whole entity. That there has to be investments made, plain and simple. So I will certainly support this motion, and I hope that HCP moves forward and does very well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Haynes, and then Wordman.
I won't repeat what my colleagues have said. This reminds me a little bit of when Swan Lake Christmas Hill were here. A beautiful presentation, a beautiful asset for Saanich. And it rests in part, the success rests in part on their ability to attract tourists. So I think that's interesting to acknowledge for both of these. There are tourist attractions. I personally think they're not as well known as they could be, and I'd be interested in following up with both of these organisations. I am the liaison at the Swan Lake Christmas Hill, just to make sure that they have the marketing resources, etc., that they need to be as strong as they could be. I'm not the liaison for this one, I wouldn't interfere, but it would be an interesting, I use the word exercise, but that's what I mean. It would be an interesting process to just touch base with their board and see, are they doing what they can for marketing, and do they even need some help with that? Because that is part of their economic go-forward position. I think it's certainly a needed request for this financing. I've read the requirements there. I can't say anything that can be easily ignored, and I'm in support of this motion.
Councillor Wordman.
Thank you, Mayor. It's a great asset and it's great work, and we have a lot of wonderful people over there. And I do support what's before us tonight, but I would ask a question of our director. And you mentioned they could take a mortgage out without our approval. We do own the land.
Through the chair to you, Councillor Wordman, yes, the land is our land, but under the terms of the lease, they can take out mortgages. They are an entity unto themselves, and they have the ability to incur debt, so they don't have to ask for our permission to do that. They do have to notify us that they have done so.
It's an interesting lease. And I'm not saying the body is irresponsible, but when we own the property and for someone to put a mortgage on something they don't own, it seems unusual, but maybe it isn't. I would like to ask the question too, the risk of default was not considered to be substantial. Was that by our staff or their board?
Through the chair, both.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Brandolph.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too want to speak on behalf of this facility. It's not just a tourist destination. It's an education component, yeah. And they've been working very hard to get the college up, and they've been doing a lot of training within the region. I do think that's one of their strengths, and that they need to continue becoming an educator in this field. So the upgrades are needed. I have to respect what our Director of Finance has said, and I do believe that we have to give them every possible chance to bring this facility into more revenue generating. It was unfortunate about the fire. They had a phenomenal campaign to raise money for the Houvelier Center. As I was saying to someone the other day, that marriages and marriage celebrations used to always happen in these type of facilities. Now they're happening outside and in Hawaii and other places. So I support the motion, and I support the HCP to get their business plan around the college and others up to strength to continue.
Thank you. That's all speakers. I'm also going to support the motion. I am concerned about the amount of money that is being put into this facility. It is a very nice facility. I think we do have to be mindful of the economic climate at the time that it was built, and it is a long-term investment for the area and for Saanich as well. So I'm happy to support it at this point, but I am going to keep an eye on it for sure. So with that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Let's move on to the next item. Please, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This next item is a recommendation from the Committee of the Whole meeting of April 20th. This is with regard to 5621 West Saanich Road, ratification of the floodplain development permit. This would see subdivision or separate residence